The government has today announced what appears to be some pretty good news for parents. Childcare fees have stayed at the same rate for about 6 months after going down recently. Of course, there's been a lot of extra money tipped in by the federal government to make this happen. Earlier I spoke with Education Minister Dan Tehan.
Well, these are the biggest reforms to childcare that we've seen in decades. So we want to make sure that we implement the new system that we've put in place, and we're seeing that has reduced out-of-pocket expenses for parents. So that's a really good start. We're now making some changes around some of the regulations to make the system easy to use. We'll continue to monitor, but so far so good in providing affordable and very good quality childcare right around the nation.
For parents, though, they've seen an improvement in their fees. Is the message to them, look, there's only so much money we can put in. This is our measure for affordability. We might revisit it in a few years, but you can't keep tipping billions more in?
Well, we've already put in $7 billion since these new childcare reforms were put in place. So it's very much, let's get the new system up and running. Let's make sure we iron out any of the fault lines that we need to, and that's what we're doing. We put in legislation 2 weeks ago to deal with those regulations. So they're not even, we're not even yet 12 months old when it comes to monitoring the changes that it's made. So we want to make sure we've got all the data. Let's see what's happened in the first 12 months when we get the final quarter for the financial year. But at this stage, $7 billion has gone in subsidies to help parents be able to get good quality and affordable childcare.
Would you call childcare right now pretty good on the affordability scale?
Oh, look, I'm sure parents would always want the government to be doing more, but we've got to balance childcare expenses with everything else we're doing, whether it be with the NDIS, whether it be with the continuing rollout of the NBN, with our $100 billion infrastructure commitments to bus congestion. So everything's got to be balanced against other priorities. And, these are major reforms, the biggest reforms we've seen in childcare for decades. So I think the best thing we can do is continue to monitor the rollout of the reforms and make sure, especially when it comes to regulation now, that we're making it as easy as possible for parents to access the system.
On to NAPLAN. The 3 biggest states have launched their own review of NAPLAN. They're still frustrated by some issues. How are you treating this review? Are you happy to look at recommendations it might come up with?
Well, there are 2 reviews that are already taking place when it comes to NAPLAN. We're looking at how we can make sure the rollout of NAPLAN online continues to go in a seamless way. There's been some difficulties, so we're looking at that. And we're also looking at how we can better present the data. So that's what I'm focused on. I think it's actually very disappointing that Victoria, New South Wales and Queensland have gone on their separate way to do another separate review of NAPLAN. We want to make sure that we do the rollout as a national initiative. Every state and territory government has bought into NAPLAN, has been part of the process, that the national bodies that oversee it, the states have representatives on those bodies. So I think what we need to be doing is focusing on getting the rollout of NAPLAN online right before we start doing bigger and broader reviews.
That's just been the latest issue, though. Wouldn't you agree there have been a lot of issues with NAPLAN and complaints from right across the board?
Not really. The last survey that was undertaken of parents showed that overwhelmingly parents support NAPLAN and support the data they get about their children's education and about where they're at, especially when it comes to their literacy and numeracy. Some of the unions have been opposed from NAPLAN from the start, and they've tended to be the loudest voices when it comes to opposition to NAPLAN. So that's why I think it's disappointing that Victoria, New South Wales and Queensland have opted to listen to those voices rather than the voices of parents who want greater transparency when it comes to how their children are performing at school.
wanted to get your thoughts as Education Minister on the recent climate strikes, school climate strikes. What were your thoughts?
Well, my thoughts are that the children should have been at school. They should have been at school learning. We're going to need future generations to have the skills when it comes to science, when it comes to technology, when it comes to research, to be able to make sure that we can continue to adapt to climate change. And those skills, the children will get those skills at school, and so that's why they should have been at school. The other thing is, if it's not climate change, what else will children be striking about? There are other worthy causes as well that they might decide they need to take on board, and if we're not careful, we'll have children out on strike for everything. So the best thing is stay at school, learn, so that you will have the skills to help us to adapt to climate change, but also make sure that if you're going to undertake these activities, do it on the weekend, do it after school. You shouldn't be doing it during school hours.
There was a weekend strike initially that didn't get a lot of attention. Can I ask, did any of your children attend?
Not that I know of, Tom, so not that I know of, but what I've always said to them, try and study hard when you're at school, and that's the best thing you can do, because that's the best way it'll set you up for life when you leave school for whatever you want to undertake. But it's particularly important for us in Australia that we've got the students with those STEM skills, because they're the students who ultimately will help us deal with climate change into the future.
Right, but I mean, you're not going to fail to be a scientist because you missed a day at school. You said you weren't aware of it. What would you have said if one of your children said, I want to go to these climate strikes, I think this is a real issue and not enough is being done about it? What would your response have been?
Well, my advice would have been that I think you're better off staying at school and learning. There are other ways that you can participate in activities on issues that you feel strongly about, and this potentially would just be the thin edge of the wedge, and we'll have students out striking, not attending school on numerous issues. So I would have advised to say I don't think it's a very sensible approach to take.
But would you have stopped them?
Oh, well, these are difficult choices that parents have, and I would have sat down, I would have talked to them, I would have discussed it with them. Ultimately, in the end, I think most schools sought parents' permission for their students to be able to attend. So, look, it didn't come to that, but I'll just wait and see, and I'll continue to discuss these and many other issues with my children.
In terms of you saying, well, they could strike over anything, when you look at the IPCC report out today and talking about rising sea levels affecting Australia in particular on that matter, that the situation is getting worse in terms of projections, not better. This is the future of the planet. I mean, are there many other bigger issues over which to strike?
No, it's a big issue, and that's why the government is taking it so seriously. That's why we're going to meet our Paris targets. That's why whenever we've signed up to commitments through the UN processes, we've met them, and our government has met them and exceeded what we've signed up to, and it's why we will continue to take action on climate change. But as we all know, it's a global problem. We've got to do this together. We've got to deal with it together. But we very much will do our bit, and the Prime Minister has made that very clear. This idea that we're not taking it seriously is something that is a myth. We are taking it seriously. If you look at all the countries globally that have met their commitments, Australia stands out as one of the very few who has met all the commitments they've signed up to right through the process.
Australia,
I was a former diplomat.
Australia also in 2015 gave this 26, sorry to jump in there, but Australia was also a country in 2015 that gave this 26 to 28% emissions reduction target. Late last year, that was effectively halved by using Kyoto carryover. That was the first time we announced we'd do that. Did we ever hear why the Australian government justified that in terms of climate goals and how the world is tracking?
Well, Well, everything that we've done has been within the rules that have been set out by the United Nations through the processes that have been agreed. And we stand amongst the very few who within those rules have met all of our commitments. And we've been part of these processes going right back.
Other countries opted not to go down that path. That's true, isn't it?
So what we've done is that we have met every single one of our commitments. Now, other countries have done what they've done and their emissions reductions in different ways. Very early on, some of those countries were able to meet their commitments incredibly easily due to structural changes in their economy, especially in Western Europe. Australia went along with that. We just committed to do what we needed to do, and we've done that. So we have very much been a participant in these processes from the very start. As a young diplomat, I remember going to Buenos Aires when these rules were first being put in place. Each country has adopted to those rules, and we have done our bit, and it's an issue that we continue to take seriously.
It would be remiss of me not to mention the grand final week, and of course I'm assuming you'll be getting along as a fanatical Tiger on Saturday. Let me ask you this though, do you think it would be good for the game in one sense for GWS to win?
Well, I think that all GWS supporters would think it would be good for the game if they won. As a passionate Richmond supporter who went through 37 long years of pain and suffering, for us to win two premierships within 3 years, I think would be very good for the game as well. So that's why I'll be going along, supporting Richmond and hoping that we win another cup, because I know that would make our more than over 100,000 members incredibly happy.
Sounds like you haven't forgotten how to handle things from your diplomatic days. Education Minister Dan Team, thanks for your time today.